So in the first part, we outlined all these players: Sabbatai Zevi, Nathan of Gaza, Jacob Frank. May as well put them side by side because now we are Sabbatai and Frankist. Adam Weishaupt, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who inherits the biggest inherited amount in Europe. So during this time, there were two of the biggest people who were involved in Freemasonry was Sigmund Geisenheimer and Moses Hess. Those were most important or very active in the Masonic lodges at this time. They were also very active in the reform movement of the Jewish reform movement. Now, here's the thing. Sigmund Geisenheimer was Mayer Amschel Rothschild's he was his head clerk. Moses Hess is hired by Mayer Amschel Rothschild to tutor his children. Moses Hess also was the mentor of Karl Marx. So now we have a Rothschild, Moses Hess, Karl Marx connection. We said how the Order of the Illuminati sounded a lot like communism. Now we have an Illuminati face. All he was a pawn for the Illuminati because they don't like to be known who they are. They are the hand that controls everything without being known. So from Moses Hess, you get Karl Marx. From Karl Marx, and we'll come back to this because the teachings of Karl Marx directly led with and this book here, Eliminate the Opiate 1, Eliminate the Opiate 2, Rabbi Marvin Antelman lays it out completely how the Reformed Jewish movement led to the Karl Marx movement, which also led to the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Vladimir Lenin in Russia. All right. But what has that got to do with us right now? Technically, not a whole lot. Although we are seeing a lot of Marxism right now going on, and that's why we need to come back to Karl Marx in a little bit. But what was going on? Let's see. Let's bring this up to how do they have anything to do with the Civil War? Well, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, he sent his 5 sons out, put them and established them in 5 different countries over banks. The Bank of France, the Bank of England, the Bank of Vienna, and I can't remember where the other 2 were. One was in London, I believe. But so when we get to the 1830s, all of a sudden we have a president named Andrew Jackson who pretty much gets rid of a centralized bank. The government starts printing out their own money, backing their own money, and it's by several different references that said that the Rothschild dynasty, the House of Rothschild, were worried and concerned about the power of this young country who was able to print money on their own. So what did they do? They hatched a plan. They wanted Lionel Rothschild to control the North, James Rothschild in France to control the South. What they wanted to do was to split the country in 2, and the North be moved into and kind of dissolve into the Canada banking system, with Canada and the northern part of the United States, with the southern part being given the French having monetary control. And guys, I'm gonna tell you, this right here is it's a lot of controversial because I'm a Southerner and I've seen a lot of stuff go on, and right, wrong, I'm not getting into all of that with the Confederate flag or anything. I'm telling you how these 2, the banking system, ended up instigating, inciting the Civil War to get monetary control. Here's the thing about it. You have the president, Abraham Lincoln. Well, when Abraham Lincoln goes in, Abraham Lincoln was strongly in favor of the Constitution and what it says about the government printing and having their own money and not letting the outside source do it. So these people hated him because of the simple fact that they couldn't get a financial stronghold in the United States at that time. So what happens? Outside agitators is what they're called, started coming into the United States. Millions of dollars were being spent by the European bankers to the outside agitators who were in the South and the North inciting. And here's the thing. These people were getting paid to go to the South, encourage the slaves to leave, to revolt, to rise up, to riot. And when they would, these agitators, they didn't give them a place to go. They didn't give them food to eat. The slaves would riot, revolt, they would leave, and then a lot of them ended up dying because they had no money, had no place to go, because these agitators would not give the southern slaves that ran away a place to stay, food, or anything. All they wanted to do was agitate the North and the South, and they used and it was said 4 years before the Civil War that they would use the issue of slavery to incite to split the country. So you start having groups like the Knights of the Golden Circle start rising. Who were some of the most prominent members of the Knights of the Golden Circle? They were Jefferson Davis and a guy named Judah Benjamin. Well, how can I make a Sabbatean Frankist connection here? Judah Benjamin. Judah Benjamin was born a Jew in, I want to say, Charleston. Charleston, South Carolina had one of the biggest Jewish settlements in the United States at that time. And if you really want to know who was in charge of transporting a lot of the slaves on the ships, it was the Sabbateans, the Jews who were outwardly Jewish but really self-hating Jews. Now let me go back to right here, because a lot of the Jacob Franks, the Frankist followers, they were rich, and a lot of the Frankists controlled the vice trades, the tobacco, the drugs, the sex trade, the brothels. They had a monopoly in a lot of areas, especially with tobacco and drugs. And that continued when these these pockets were underground. They were underground, and they were also making money by running things that most people wouldn't do. They would do it. So Judah Benjamin, at a young age, his parents rejected Orthodox Judaism and were a part of the Sigmund Geisenheimer, Moses Hess, early in the Reform movement. They were in the United States as some of the earliest members of the Reform Jewish movement. They rejected Orthodox Judaism. All right. Judah Benjamin you have to be a Civil War buff to know who Judah Benjamin is, because there's not a lot out there. Judah Benjamin was Jefferson Davis's. He ended up becoming a senator. And so when the war broke out, he served as the Secretary of War, Secretary of State. He was called the Prince of the Confederacy. He was the brains of the Confederacy, all kinds of stuff. Well, the connection was Judah Benjamin, through the law firm in New Orleans that he was partnered with, I believe it was Seidel was their last name. Well, that was the connection to James Rothschild. James Rothschild began to fund the South, which gave the South control. France had control over the Confederate currency. Here's the thing. Jefferson Davis and Judah Benjamin met daily. So here's a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said, "I have two great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, the one in my rear is my greatest foe." So he was constantly pursued by the North to take out loans with them so they could get a strong hold over the North's money system. Abraham Lincoln adamantly refused it. He actually contacted them and wanted to know about a loan to help finance the war. They told him that it would be a 29% interest. He got mad. He was furious, and he started printing out their own currency. He started printing out what was called as Lincoln's greenbacks. The Lincoln greenbacks is what helped them win the war, basically, because they were printing money that was debt-free and not beholden to somebody else having to pay them back interest on taxes for the people. So you have Judah Benjamin, who, when everything started going south, in the South, a lot of the generals were blaming Judah Benjamin. Now, Jefferson Davis's wife said that him and Judah Benjamin met daily and sometimes hours a day, but yet, well, when when the war was over, Judah Benjamin leaves the United States. He burns every document pertaining to him, to the money, to everything. He leaves and goes to Europe or England. He becomes an international lawyer. He never speaks about the Civil War. He never talks about the life he had in America. Immediately when he got to England, he started going to bat for Jefferson Davis's innocence in the whole thing. And so Jefferson Davis visited Judah Benjamin 5 times in Europe after the Civil War, but yet Jefferson Davis, in his writings, he never really mentions much about Judah Benjamin. Never. It's hard to find anything on Judah Benjamin. He was a Sabbatean Frankist. He left. He went to, he ended up dying, I believe, somewhere in France. He changed his name. Before he died, he burnt and got rid of every document that he ever had pertaining to anything that anybody could find as far as his money. Now, it is a conspiracy theory that the South's money was held at a bank in England. And when Judah Benjamin left, it was in England waiting on him. That's a conspiracy theory. I don't know. I do know everything about his life points back toward being a Sabbatean Frankist. His close ties to the Rothschilds, he was a Rothschild agent in the South. You got to realize the Rothschilds use agents. So that brings us to another guy that Judah Benjamin would most had to know, would have been General Albert Pike. Hold on, let me grab the book so I can read a quote from Albert Pike. Albert Pike was a Civil War general. He was a 33rd degree Mason, and he was over the, I can't remember, the Southern something or another. If you're a Mason, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know because I'm not one. But General Pike was the head of that. And here goes a quote directly from General Pike, and it's been disputed. I've had people tell me, oh, well, General Pike was kicked out of the Masons when he said that. No, he wasn't. He stayed as the Grand Master until the day he died. Here was a quote. He said, "Lucifer the light bearer, Lucifer the son of the morning, strange and mysterious name to give the spirit of darkness. Is it he who bears the light and with its splendors intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not. General Albert Pike. Judah Benjamin had to know Albert Pike. Albert Pike was probably one of the most prominent Satanists in the United States at this time. So, from there, there's all kinds. And when the North wins, guess what? America is printing their own money. The Southern Confederate money is obsolete. America is not beholden to the Rothschilds of the North or the South in any kind of way. What happens? 10 days later, Abraham Lincoln is killed on, what was that, Good Friday, buried on Easter Sunday. So we have a connection there. What happened eventually after the Civil War? Let me take these off. Because, guys, this is what we have going on in our country right now. We have Sabbatai and Frankists who have Marxist leanings, who are stirring up race because they want us divided in every way possible, because there's a goal. And people think I'm crazy when I say it, but there's a one world government is the goal. That's the goal. And a one world currency. So how these people, it was, they were unrelentless in everything they did. So let me take these off. So the Rothschilds, right after the Civil War, we'll call them the House of Rothschilds, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. It's hard to keep up with them, because the Rothschilds, even though they would split up into 5 families, they would also marry back into cousins. Of his 50-some odd grandchildren, I believe it was 29 married back into cousins. So they were very big into keeping the money within the Rothschild family, but by doing that, it also makes it hard to start to keep up with the lineages of the Rothschilds. So we just call them the House of Rothschilds. The House of Rothschilds, they sent 2 agents to the United States to essentially corrupt the robber barons. They sent Jacob Schiff, they sent Max Warburg to the United States to corrupt anybody who had been successful. They were to, hey, if you start teaching or our cause, our beliefs, you'll have more money and power than you ever knew existed. We act like the temptation of Jesus when he was on a fast and went out into the desert, and when the devil came to him and was tempting him, he was like, bow down before me and I'll give you all this. We act like that was a one-time deal. No, it's an open offer to anybody that will take it. So who were they sent to corrupt? And they were successful with a bunch of them. And just start naming them off. Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Rockefellers, E.H. Harriman. All right. So through here, you have these robber barons, and it was in 1913 that they were able to establish, under the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, the Federal Reserve. Who were some of the main players in forming the Federal Reserve? Max Warburg's brother Paul was the architect for the Federal Reserve. He brought along the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, and there were a few others, but them were the ones right there. The Federal Reserve was passed on December the 23rd at like 4 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in that neighborhood, after all their opposition had gone home for Christmas. The Federal Reserve was passed in the middle of the night, a lot like Obamacare, and you had the robber barons who were helping do this with the Federal Reserve. Now we have the House of Rothschilds control the United States banking system. So from there, you have, let me put these back here, because we start to see, you can start to see the cult's hand going in all kind of different places, and names start connecting. E.H. Harriman is going to be one of the main ones that I'll come back to in a little bit. But because there's a lot of things going on in the 1850s, over here, bunch of different places and all over the world. Over here, you got revolt, or the beginnings of the uprising with the Bolsheviks. That even though it didn't come till after World War I, roots were already being planted. Roots were already being planted here. They'll also be planted somewhere else. Now, on a side note, you can go find a note that was written by General Albert Pike that accurately described in 1871, don't quote me on that date, it was in the late 1800s. He accurately predicted 3 wars. He accurately predicted World War I, and he said it was going to be mainly fought to overthrow, that would eventually overthrow the czars and lead to a communist government in Russia. He said that. And he said the second war would be the fight against fascism in Germany against political Zionism. That would lead to the Zionist state of Israel. That happened. And we'll show you how they knew all about this. Well, about the same time, you start having this thing called Zionism arises in the late 1800s with a guy named Theodor Herzl. Well, Theodor Herzl is the father of Zionism. You can find him anywhere as the father of Zionism. He was not a Sabbatean. Theodor Herzl was just an energetic activist on behalf of, as a Jew, wanting a home state for Jerusalem, or for the Jews. So in 1898, Theodor Herzl meets Kaiser Wilhelm in Jerusalem. Kaiser Wilhelm was the leader of Germany. Theodor Herzl met him in Jerusalem. At this time, Jerusalem was a dump. It was disease-ridden. There were thugs. It was just not a nice place to live. He asked Kaiser Wilhelm for pretty much a home state in Jerusalem. Kaiser Wilhelm tells him that's not going to happen. We have an alliance with Turkey. Turkey is allowing us to build a church at the highest point in Jerusalem, which was the Domitian Abbey, and that there was no way that they were going to break that alliance to give Zionism a home state. Okay, that was in 1798. In 1791, Theodor Herzl gets called for a meeting with somebody from the British dynasty, because the British dynasty wanted to establish a state, a homeland in Israel, in Jerusalem, in ancient Palestine. Well, why the British dynasty? Why do they want to do that? When you get to looking at it, the British dynasty believes that they are one of the Jewish descendants from the tribe of Dan. Hence the name London, which they said once meant the home of Dan or land of Dan. And over time, kind of like how Charlestown became Charleston, London became London. So the British dynasty so Theodor Herzl tells whoever he met with the British dynasty that it wasn't going to happen. There was an alliance between Germany and Turkey, and that the only way it would happen is if they went to war and millions would die. So Theodor Herzl says, let us have land in Uganda. You have land in Uganda. Let us have that. But Uganda wouldn't have worked because it didn't fit the Sabbateans' plan. Because the Masonic Lodge and the Masons, when they were banned over here in Bavaria, they went straight to England and started there. Went from England, Germany, Turkey, and when they hit the Masonic Lodges, they hit them all over the world, pretty much, to where there were lodges. So, after that meeting in 1794, Theodore Herzl ends up being checked into a sanatorium. 10 days later, he's dead for whatever reason. You cannot find the reason why he was dead. A Jewish author, he just died here a couple months ago, I reckon. His name was Barry Shamish. He done a lot of the research on this, and he believes that Theodore Herzl was killed by the Zionists because the Zionists were also being controlled by the House of Rothschilds. So when that happens, you get another guy who starts to, I don't know who it is, who takes over from him, but it ends up being I don't know who that guy was. It ends up with another guy named Chaim Weissman. We'll get to him in a minute because he was a real cool dude, I swear. Nah, really he wasn't. He was evil. So when this is going on, and British knew that they had to, how do you get to where you got to go, or where you want to get to? And let me find my notes here because there's a lot of dates. 1891, that was it. 1891 in Turkey, there's formed a group. There was a Committee of Union and Progress in Turkey. They didn't stay that way long. They eventually became the Young Turks. Guys, I'll tell you, you can look this up online anywhere. The Young Turks, they were led by a guy named Emmanuel Caruso, who was directly connected to the Rothschilds. So he was a Rothschilds agent working in Turkey to basically stir things up. They had a paper called Revolution Press. They moved freely through Masonic lodges. Isn't that a coincidence? Well, here's what happens. And this is what you get this. You get a guy named Gavrilo Princip, who, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was coming into, I believe it was Serbia, you have the Sultan Abdul Hamid II is the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Gavrilo Princip assaults the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He assassinates him with the Sultan's gun. That pretty much was the spark that incited World War I. Well, how did he get his gun to kill him? The Young Turks provided it for him. Okay? That ended up leading through all of this. And who were the Young Turks? Who were the Young Turks? Most of all the Young Turk leadership were Dome. Those were the ones who converted with Sabbatai Zevi to Islam, who were secret Sabbatarians. They held the leadership of the Young Turks. And while this was going on, all this, it ended up leading to the American Christian genocide of World War I, which they killed 1.5 million Christians. Yeah, the Armenian Christian genocide. So that leads to eventually all of this. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk becomes the leader of the new Turkey. Guy, look him up. All you gotta do is Google him, look at his pictures. Without a doubt, he was Don. He spoke fluent Hebrew. He grew up as a Sephardic Jew. He hid it, but this cat was whiter than me. There's no way. Everybody has their stereotypes of what Muslims and people look like. This guy, there's no doubt he was a Don. You can still find the Don in Turkey today. You can still find them. Well, why did America get into this mess right here, this World War I? Well, here's the thing. Let me move these out of the way, because they're irrelevant now. You have Germany was just about to pull out of England. Russia done pulled out. France done got their butt kicked and went back home. And there was a guy by the name of Benjamin H. Friedman who gave a speech at Washington D.C. at the Willard Hotel in 1961. You can find his speech on YouTube. Again, his name is Benjamin H. Friedman. And he tells the story of why America got into World War I. And it's very interesting. So, what happened was Germany was kicking everybody's tail. So, right before England was getting ready to leave or pull out, he goes to the Rothschild Zionists. They meet with the British War Cabinet and they cut a deal. They tell him, you can win this war, and all this is coming from Benjamin H. Friedman. He's telling this. It's pretty lengthy, but I'm going to give you the condensed version. And he goes on to saying how Germany was the most pro-Jewish country in the world at before World War I. They had already been run out of Russia, run out of other countries. Germany gave them full citizenship rights as if you were German. So the House of Rothschild goes to the British War Cabinet and they say, if we get America into the war and you win, if we get America in, you'll win. But when you win, we want the land of Palestine. Well, and he says just like that, what all the news media in the United States that were predominantly